Force commanders had correctly assumed that the Egyptians would be unprepared, with most officers still driving to their bases. Peeling off to fly in low under Arab radar, the strike planes knocked out the Egyptian Air Force largely before it could leave the ground. Air crews flew some 500 sorties before mid-morning. At each briefing, pilots were told their first priority was to destroy planes on the ground, spending as long as possible over the target and returning on minimum fuel. Mirage 3s speed to their distant targets, flying low over the Mediterranean to evade Egyptian radar. Some Egyptian MiGs escaped the onslaught. Altogether, 19 Egyptian air bases were put out of action and over 400 planes destroyed as the Israeli jets arrived simultaneously over their targets. Those Egyptian planes that did get airborne were destroyed in dogfights. The Israelis lost 26 aircraft, but one air supremacy, which proved decisive in the fighting to come. This remarkable achievement was summed up by its architect, the daring and innovative Israeli Air Commander, Major General Mordecai Hod.
The Egyptian Air Force was destroyed, or almost destroyed, in 3 hours. Matter of fact, a little bit less than 3 hours, but I'll make it around the figure. The achievement, of course, was made by pilots, very young ones. The average age of the Israeli pilots is about 23. They are all trained here by the Israeli Air Force, and now I can say they are the best pilots in the world.
With command of the skies, Israeli armour mounted a complex series of lightning strikes, notably on Abu Agela and other key Egyptian fortified towns in northern Sinai and Gaza. A series of battles took them west to Bir Gafgafka and south to break the blockade of Tehran and complete the encirclement of the Egyptian divisions at Nakle. Monday, June the 5th, 1967, and the Israelis prepared to launch their singularly devastating offensive across the Egyptian border. Here in the desert waste, 3 Israeli divisions had gathered to face 7 Egyptian divisions, a force nearly 3 times larger and with at least double the number of tanks. The assault was spearheaded by the British Centurion tank, which decisively outscored the Russian-built T-54-55s used by the Egyptians. Alongside them, jeeps with anti-tank recoilless rifles. The speed of the advance surprised the Egyptians, who expected the slower tempo of opening moves seen in 1956. But instead of striking at the centre, the Israelis attacked Gaza. The breakthrough was achieved by the 7th Armoured Brigade, commanded by Colonel Shmuel Gonen. They outflanked the fortifications and minefields, attacking over dunes considered impassable by the Egyptian defenders. Fierce hand-to-hand fighting followed the tank battle, and the main towns fell before dusk on the first day. Egyptian tanks fell prey to well-armed and efficient infantry. Israeli tank commanders were also frequent casualties, a result of fighting from open turrets. Some trenches were only cleared after bitter exchanges. But it was accomplished with little loss of momentum to the offensive. The strategy continually was to trap and encircle enemy armour and destroy it as it tried to break out. The Israelis entered Gaza on Tuesday lunchtime, halfway through the second day after what they described as a brutal battle. But the pause, like the welcome, would be short-lived. Thousands of mines had to be cleared from the deep echelons of the Egyptian defences. But as some rested momentarily, others fought street battles to flush out the last resistance by Egyptian commandos. It was a bitter and unexpected defeat for the Egyptians. The Egyptian commander in Gaza, Major General Abdul Munah Husseini, still looks bewildered by the speed of his force's demise as he signs the surrender document, hastily scribbled out on a scrap of paper by his Israeli captors. Further west, Wessex helicopters brought in paratroopers by night to outflank Egyptian strongpoints in the most important battle of the Sinai theatre for Abu Agheila. Here, the Israeli offensive was led by a future defense minister, General Ariel Sharon. Once they reached the main Egyptian defensive positions, Sharon brought forward the divisional artillery units to soften them up by persistent bombardment. Abu Agheila fell at lunchtime on the second day after what was probably the most complicated battle of all the Arab-Israeli wars. By Wednesday, Egyptian forces were fleeing for safety beyond the Suez Canal. Israeli training aircraft, modified to take rockets, joined the attack on the disintegrating Egyptian armies. They swooped on the fleeing convoys as they converged on the bottleneck of the Mitla Pass, just 20 kilometers from the Suez Canal. Mirage 3s, recently brought from France, were also bombed up. Refueling, rearming and changing pilots took just 7 minutes before the next series of strikes that decimated the Egyptian army east of Suez. The 3 Israeli brigades were now being closely coordinated to prevent them mistakenly firing on each other. Seven Egyptian divisions, 70,000 men, were totally destroyed in scenes that became famous around the world. In many cases, vehicles and weapons were simply abandoned in the haste to get back to the Suez Canal. Hundreds of vehicles littered the landscape. With the dramatic collapse of the Egyptian army, the way was wide open to the Suez Canal. In front of them, fewer than 100 of the Egyptians' 1,000 tanks managed to cross the canal to safety. Their rout had been compounded by conflicting orders from the Egyptian commander, Field Marshal Abdul Hakim Ammar, which created panic in the defeated army.